he's back in it. He's back in it. Paul McVeigh.
I'm going to go for Norwich City against Man City this weekend. Well, clearly, but Norwich are a proper club. You know, it's well run. The finances are in check. Very good manager. Some really good up and coming players. They're not throwing their money around just because some rich Arab guys come in and put in a whole lot of. What's that in the background? I don't know.
Mr. McVeigh.
You know, even Tevez earns more than the whole Norwich squad put together, and he can't even be bothered getting off the bench and warming up. They think this 2 years ago, Norwich were playing against Carlisle in the FA Cup second round. That just shows the size of the task that Norwich are up against today. And in that time, Man City have been spending hundreds of millions. Still think we'll win.
That's lovely. Mark.
Firstly, I agree with Dougie that we should forget the harbouring of Nazi war criminals, just in general. I think I'll sort of,
let's go over it.
Okay? Yeah, let's try. Let's move on.
And let's move on from that subject.
And I agree with Andy about the FA Cup second round. It's if you want to pick an underdog other than Stourbridge, you've got AFC Tottenham tomorrow to play Bristol's second best team, Bristol Rovers. Who wouldn't like to see Tottenham heap shame upon Bristol Rovers tomorrow? Tottenham have had a hard history because it sounds exactly like you're saying Tottenham, and it's not good to be the second best club that sound like that. But in general, the best thing about these clubs going all the way to the third round is that there's even more opportunities for Peter Drury to talk about how they're all painters and decorators, builders. Basically, almost no DIY, no work gets done at all in Britain.
And also the chance for the managers to come on the radio. I heard one this morning saying, "We are a sleeping giant." He was the manager of Chelmsford. They're not a sleeping giant.
They've been sleeping for well over 100 years now. The pulse is dangerous.
Sleeping men.
Let's just say they're well rested. All right, let's move on to everyone give an answer they must have, because the scores are very close. Di Green won an award this week. The jump off the sofa moment of the year. This was at the Jaguar Sports Academy Awards. It was for his 400-metre hurdles gold at the World Championships in South Korea. This prompted the always funny James Corden to remark, "I jumped off the sofa to switch off Channel 4 because it was so bleep." It was a reference to the coverage, not the run. Without my involvement, the Fight and Talk pool of writers voted 98-57 in favour of this question. What has been the worst broadcast coverage of sport ever? This is dangerous. I will not comment. There'll probably be no points available either, and I'll disagree with everything you say. Andy Dunn.
You know, and this is actually one that my dad tells me about, which was the 1952 Grand National, and ancient was owned in by a woman called Mrs. Topham, a fearsome woman, 18 stone. It's got nothing to do with it, by the way, but she was a big woman, and she would not pay. She would not pay to have professional commentators, so she got some of her family and staff to do it. And a horse called Teal won the Grand National that day. But however, the commentator had calling it as a fall at the first fence, and thousands of people had ripped up their betting slips. She refused to allow the race to be televised because she thought that people wouldn't come. Like everyone had plasma screens at home then in 1952, you know. So next year she had to relent. Peter O'Sullivan commentated and got 12 guineas for it, which is my fee for this show, Mark, as well. It's supposed to be £8 grand.
It's not about the sport for you, it's about going back to the hotel after having a lovely night with the Scousers.
The best thing is, as well, it's not the modern translation of 12 guineas. We're actually giving him 12 guineas.
He's actually getting 12 guineas, yeah.
Which he can't spend anywhere.
He's got them in front of him on the desk there.
Paul McVeigh.
Well, I've got another Grand National story. This time it's from 1993.
Excellent.
When 30 of the 39 runners set off, but obviously there was a problem with the starting tape and it was a false start. So like, this is 300 million people watching this around the world. They decided to carry on. Some jockeys knew how to stop, but the rest of them just kept going. Eventually SNS won it, and it was rowed by John White, but there's complete confusion on what was happening. Didn't know whether the bookies were actually going to pay out on the end. And the worst thing is, my dad had a tenner on it, a 50 to 1. He never got his money.
Oh, horse race is getting an absolute tune here. Who would have thought it? Dougie, any other?
Well, my Grand National story has absolutely nothing to do with the Grand National. Consistently, the worst broadcast is any third, fourth place playoff in a major sporting tournament. Nobody's really interested in it as the main prize is already gone. The broadcasters try to get excited about it, but it's futile. I feel sorry for Manish from the Football League show, who probably lies in bed and go, well, I know I'll have one gig at the World Cup year, the old third, fourth place playoff. It's the sporting equivalent of chatting up a really good looking girl who after an hour mentions her boyfriend, and you're left with you're left with a decision. Do I try and chat up a boiler, or do I just go home alone?
All the points you would have got have been taken off for that last comment. Mark.
I think the worst broadcast that I've heard on sport I was involved in, and it was no one's fault, but I went on Richard Bacon's show this year, I think it was, when they were unveiling whether England would host the World Cup or not. And we thought it would be any minute now. 3 or 4 hours of padding. These things go on forever, and in the end, of course, it was Qatar. So it's just me, Marcotti, and Bacon there singing. And Bacon just had to keep saying, in a minute we'll know who's hosting the World Cup. In a minute we'll find out. In a minute we'll find out. And then, of course, England didn't even get to the final bit. So Bacon had to say, in a minute we've just heard it's not England. And everyone just sort of sat there while they read out Russia and Qatar, and everyone felt pretty miserable.
Right, the scores as they stand at the moment.
5 Live broadcasting is normally excellent, by the way.
Yeah, just like they are that, and brilliant for promoting DVDs.
Oh, it's wonderful, yeah, if you're into that.
And he looked out the window again. You see this? You're never sitting near the window again, Watson.
It's such a hell of a view, it really is.
He would actually be in the lead if he stopped looking out the window, but instead he's joined second with Dougie and Paul on 33 points each, and Andy has not a safe lead at all on 34. Right, dwarf throwing. Boob Nuzzling, Red Nose Star Mike Tyndall complained this week that the RFU had made a scapegoat of him for England's poor performance at the Rugby World Cup. It begs the question, who've been sport's genuine scapegoats, Andy?
David Ginola was the scapegoat in 1993, and it's still going on. If you remember, it's still going on. If you remember quickly the scene that they need to get a draw against Bulgaria, France to qualify for '94. It's 1-1. It's the last minute. David Ginola's down by the corner flag, could keep possession. Instead, not surprisingly, he tries a Hollywood ball. Bulgaria got up to the end of the score. Gerald Hurley said he felt like he'd been stabbed in the back. And all this time, and now a book's just come out which mentioned it again, and Gino's now suing Houllier 18 years on. I mean, you just get to think though that they just as a scapegoat for France, he's just got to be one.
They've won the World Cup since. They should really get over it.
Yeah, is he suing him?
No,
Apparently
yes,
so.
yeah. Well,
he's considering suing. He is suing, I'm sure he is.
He's suing because Houllier said that L'Oreal wasn't that good.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, if he's not, he's probably going to sue you for saying that.
Either way, he's quits it. Good point, Paul. Let's have your answer, Cities. You're rudely interrupting people, which is the fight and talk way.
Well, I'm going to go for Jack Warner when he resigned with that golden handshake or the house in the Caribbean or whatever he got when Sepp Blatter walked away untouched again. I think it's easy to hammer Sepp Blatter on here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should get points for that alone. But he come
Don't
up.
ask for points, son. Don't ask for points. You'd already got them.
Sorry
Should
about
get
that.
points for
But
that.
he always just seems to come up smelling the roses every time. And Sepp Blatter does look like Baron Greenback.
Allegedly for everything, and Dougie.
Yeah, of course.
Just going back to the Tyndall thing for a second, he's not the scapegoat. Martin Johnson's had far more flack in the press than Tyndall has. And Johnson was an outstanding player, outstanding captain, of course. He had no previous experience of managing. Blame the people who decided for him to become manager, not Johnson himself. But I think the biggest scapegoat, and one which gets
It's a 3 answer.
no, it's a two. No, double whammy. What gets a really bad rap and is a scapegoat is fixture congestion. Not even a person, but a thing. A week ago, Kenny Dalglish was moaning that they had to play Man City on the Sunday, go down to Chelsea and play there. They win 2-0, he's all smiles. Fixture congestion forgotten about.
Give you a point just to shut up.